welcome to the TBH with me, Toby B Hemingway podcast. This is the monthly digest where I go through all the month's stories from my Substack of the same name. September, my goodness, it marked the second year of doing the Substack. So the first story I wrote in September was about that. Thank you all very much for subscribing or listening to this or whatever. I think I started doing the audio versions about a year ago, and then putting them together on this podcast a few months ago. But the Substack itself and the writing has been going on pretty much every week for the last 2 years. It's a lot of work, but it's been fun. You know, I really didn't know what I was going to write about when I started. I was digging into a lot of archival stuff. This used to be called the Hemingway Chronicle, and I was going through old music recordings and photographs and writing a bit about my past, I guess, and old pieces of writing and new pieces of writing. And then pretty soon you realize, well, you got to do this every week. I don't have that much past that's going to be of interest. So it's sort of morphed into a way to write more about what's happening in my life most of the time. Sometimes I've done longer pieces and more broad pieces. But anyway, I didn't see that coming. I didn't see writing so much about myself every week coming. But people seem to get a kick from it, and it's been a good exercise. Can I keep doing it every week? I don't know. Something will probably change again soon. Suggestions are welcome. But yeah, a couple of ideas I'm thinking about. Anyway, I wrote about being mistaken for an Italian man a couple of times over the summer. That's just what I wound up writing about when I was writing about the 2-year anniversary. Next up, I wrote about watching the first presidential debate between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris with my kids. The interesting stuff they had to say. I think it's hard for kids with things like politics because they can sort of see what's going on and they can sort of tell how their parents feel and what the atmosphere is. But I think it can seem kind of pointless and scary at the same time for kids. But I think it feels that way for adults a lot of the time too. Pointless and scary. Probably sums up political debates on television in general. Anyway, that was fun. So I wrote about what they had to say. Also wrote about my daughter and her new school backpack because it was back to school in September. September went by in a flash. God damn. And one of the things that's happened to me in September was my neck and shoulder and back and stuff were killing me. And I partly blame my school bag from when I was a kid. So I wrote about that and her new school bag, which is just fantastic. And then finally, given that the election stuff just sort of swirls around you in America during an election year and it just ramps up and up and up and is inescapable, I saw it sneaking into my writing, and I don't typically love writing about politics. I don't typically love thinking about it that much, but it is so inescapable and becomes such a part of one's life in the long, long US election cycle that I figured, what the hell, for the next few weeks, I'm doing this series called Electionland 2024, just trying to write about what it's like to be here. I think, you read a lot of political analysis. I know that listeners and readers outside of America still follow American politics, but I really wanted to write about, what it feels like to be here, to be a normal person trying to live through an American election cycle. So hopefully you enjoy those pieces. I just posted another one for the first post of October about the vice presidential debate. But the first one I wrote that you'll hear at the end of this podcast is about lawn signs, a great American political staple. They're popping up. It's that time of year. A lot of ones for city council in our neighborhood right now. A lot of ones for city council. I think they're a little safer because they don't tend to be party affiliated. So no one's going to get on you for who you're backing in the city council elections. Anyway, that's enough. Let's get to the stories. Thanks again for listening again. Please subscribe to the TBH with Toby B. Hemingway Substack if you don't already, tbhemingway.substack.com. And please like and subscribe to this podcast so that the machines, give it a boost. That'd be great. Enjoy the stories. Buon compleanno from September 5, 2024. TBH is 2 years old this week. I'll include a discount code for my online shop at the end of this piece as a thank you for being on this journey with me. I really appreciate it. Time marches on and there is nothing we can do about it. Not that you realise most days, then something mundane will ring the bell in your head. Unwelcome reminders are everywhere. At my favourite donut shop in the burnt orange strip mall near my house on Tuesday, the one seemingly only I, vagrants, and a man with a circular moustache that goes all the way around his mouth in a chilling crumb trap frequent, the owner pointed out that he hadn't seen me in a while. I was out of the country, I said. In Italy, he replied confidently. It was the second time this summer that someone has assumed I'm Italian. The same thing happened in an elevator in Guadalajara, Mexico. On that occasion, I felt kind of flattered. See, I said to my family later, I may be getting old, but I must look more sophisticated. Cue the groans. That idea is a hangover from my actual place of birth that I guess I haven't shaken. Much of white Australia still tends to gaze upon Europe from far afar, quietly revering its rich cultural history and sophistication. They have grand cathedrals and wonky old town squares over there, and signature dishes and famous painters you always confuse with the other one. We had beaches. Being in the US isn't all that different. A plucky young country that turned its nose up at all things European. They even had a war just to make sure the Brits would never call again. But the multicultural stew has had longer to simmer here. American culture is a global behemoth, and most citizens don't even want a passport, let alone the unimaginable agony of needing a different currency. I've been confused for lots of people and ethnicities over the years. Once when I was closing the pub I managed in Melbourne, 2 drunk pool players were reluctant to leave. Eventually I had to take the white ball off the table. Typical Jew, one grumbled under his breath. I chuckled to myself at first, then felt offended. 4 Jews? I was confused. I would later come to know that emotion as empathy, but at 22 years old the feeling just pissed me off. I asked them to leave in no uncertain terms. I'm a long way from 22 now, and this new Italian identity isn't sitting well with me. We all know the stereotypical image of Italian men from the drawings on pizza boxes. They look like terrific fun. But my mind turns to actual middle-aged Italian men, like the ones I've seen with my own eyes in Italy. In my private stereotype, I picture a man leaning against the wall on a crowded street corner in odd-length shorts and a neckerchief, smoking slowly and grabbing his crotch every time a young woman passes by. I figure this guy's sold someone a forged painting once or twice and has a kid who thinks he's their uncle. Am I beginning to remind people of that person? I'm not into any of those things. I don't even know the difference between a yacht and a boat. Time changes us, though, and we don't get to choose how. 2 years into writing to you, with countless new grey hairs, and maybe that's just who I am now. Mio Dio. Out of the Mouths of Babes, from September 13th, 2024. My plan was to watch this week's presidential debate at a bar, but childcare hiccups came along, as they often do, and by 6 p.m. Pacific Time Tuesday, I was instead sitting down in the living room to watch with my children. I know, the bar would have been much more interesting, potentially, yet I was stuck at home. I made pizza, which feels American enough, with apologies to actual Italians, and served it at the coffee table, grabbing a beer to take the edge off. Then I sat back to see what the candidates, plus a 10-year-old boy and a 6-year-old girl, might have to say. A lot of what Donald Trump said could have been mistaken for one of the kids, though my children certainly aren't nearly that mean or racist or petty. I could go on. Anyway, here's a sampling of what I heard from them as we watched. How old is he? He looks 100. Oh my God, what is he talking about? You already said that. It's true, I saw it on TV. I saw it on TV. Really? Who won the election? You already said that. What an idiot. When's Mum coming home? He's saying it again. It seems like the hosts aren't on his side. I'm bored. You already said that. This is so stupid. Oh my God. Can I go across the street and play? Me too? They left well before the end of proceedings to play with the neighbours. The heat had gone out of the exchange anyway, and I caught the last bits of back and forth while tidying up the dishes. The next day we engaged in a more joyful American tradition, driving to the sporting goods store after school to pick out a new baseball bat for my son. On the way home, he pointed out one of those roadside Trump merch stands, which seemed to be popping up more this year than in other elections. My son scoffed and said something about a gaudy banner emblazoned with that unmistakable, scowling orange face. Why don't you see Harris ones? My daughter asked. Because people who vote for her are reasonable people, replied my son, before I could answer. I had nothing further. Travelling Light from September 19th, 2024. My daughter has a new backpack. It's that time of year. Back to school, another of America's perfectly monitored and synchronised shopping seasons. Though she bought hers well before first grade began, by early summer she knew the exact type she wanted for the new school year, a rolling backpack. When I was at school, we all lugged these ridiculous flat-bottomed duffels slung over one shoulder, bulging with books, football gear, and the mouldy crusts of ancient sandwiches. I've been dealing with neck and shoulder problems lately. Everything's out of whack in there. On the same side, I hauled my bag every day, between 3 trams and a bus each way. No coincidence, I often think to myself. No such burden for my daughter and many of her elementary schoolmates, though. Walking the few blocks from our house to campus each morning, the children start to appear, from around corners, out of cars, off of cargo bikes and other wheeled contraptions. Most kids move at 2 times normal adult speed, racing down the sidewalk, hair akimbo, many with roller bags dragging loudly behind them. They look like a swarm of tiny sales reps, hungover and late for their flight from a convention in Las Vegas. My daughter's roller bag is dazzling, pink and purple, emblazoned with a mermaid's tail rising out of a sequined ocean. It came with a matching lunch bag, also sequined, the back of which has an elastic strap so that it can be slid over the retractable handle to rest atop the backpack like an airline passenger's personal item. She insists on carrying it this way, usually last minute, causing bag spills and sighs and an inevitable bottleneck at our front door. Then she's off, down the street and away from me, as if the airline changed gates last minute. Is this a part of early education now, I wonder, packing for an overbooked flight? It feels very LA, but somewhat useful too. My attraction to packing compactly came later in life and out of necessity. First on tour as a musician in my 20s, where luggage room is limited and instruments take precedence. At one point, when touring in the UK and Europe fairly often, I winnowed my whole wardrobe down to 1 belt, 2 pairs of boots, and garments that could all be worn together without ever clashing. That's professional level light travel, and I can tell you, the simplicity was bliss. I still think that way when I pack. Nowadays, it's the airlines that have reined me in. In middle age, I've had to accept the reality that no one's coming to save me. I'm probably a coach flyer for life, and conditions are only growing more dire. I best get good at it. Checking bags is a costly and often timely extravagance for us coaches. I'd rather wear the same thing for 4 days than pay yet another sneaky fee, or have to spend more time talking to helpless, overworked airline staff about my lost bag. So my roller is packed tight, and I choose my travel wardrobe carefully. I always fly in my heaviest shoes and coat, prepare to launder in a sink if need be, and squeeze my way in and out of economy conveyances with as much dignity as one can, even if to others it may seem impractical. When my daughter's bag is tipped over for the 6th or 7th time heading home from school, its miniature wheels trying to navigate busted up sidewalks and fallen pine cones, and the lunch container has circled the handle multiple times, I complain, wondering if we'll ever get home. Her brother groans, and I beg her just to abandon the wheels for once, use the attached backpack straps, and get on with it. But she doesn't listen to me. She soldiers on, eyes to the wind, as the song goes. That's how she wants to do it, and that's the way it's going to happen. I have to admire her. The sequins might scream first, but she's a fellow coacher all the way. Bless her. Electionland 2024, Signs of Life. From September 27th, 2024. Between now and the US election in November, I'll be sharing stories about what it's like to be here. Here when our culture is hijacked for months on end by all things political. Here where it feels impossible to escape every plot twist and turn. Here in Electionland 2024. Our neighbour put out a Harris for President lawn sign this week, flanked by two small, crisp American flags on either side, as if it were holding a press conference. I don't know much about this neighbour. I know his first name. I know he has a friend from Sydney. He has 3 vehicles, mysteriously, one full of what looks like camera equipment. Mostly, though, he keeps to himself and is often on the phone when he walks by with his fluffy little dog. Lawn signs are an American political staple, particularly in a presidential election year. I've only ever supported Democrats for president, which is hardly a stance in need of bolstering in urban California, so save for a couple of Obama stickers in '08 and buttons in return for donations, I never think to order any campaign materials. I don't always see the point. Still, it was surprisingly comforting to see our neighbour's sign. I felt an unexpected sense of relief, mostly in knowing that when we do finally strike up another conversation, it's not likely to be an awkward political one, as can often happen, without warning and frequently tinged with anger, more and more in the dark days of this regrettable US cultural sequel, Trump 3. In the Trump years, now numbering almost a decade, shockingly, the sight of his many forms of merchandise alone has been traumatic. Those of the MAGA persuasion don't settle for lawn signs. There are the crude, nonsensical T-shirts, popular day-to-day attire amongst many locals on my last visit to Arizona. The hats, of course. Those bastards have ruined red hats with white writing for the rest of us. I had to throw out one from an innocent brewery in Vancouver some years back. I just couldn't take the risk. In 2016, on the day after the Trump won election, my wife and I happened to fly to New York. Our hotel was just a block from Trump Tower, and protests prevented us from making it all the way there in a cab. The next morning, we went for breakfast at a busy deli nearby. It was an eerie time to be in America's 2 largest cities, where voters had overwhelmingly rejected Trump. The sense of mourning was palpable, and even that crowded deli, a few days into the shock, was uncharacteristically quiet and sombre. Not long after we arrived, a young man entered, chest out, wearing a camo hat with that pointless phrase, "Make America Great Again," stitched in caution orange. Its not being red was camouflage in itself, but the brag was clear. My entire adult life, I've never wanted to punch someone in the face so badly. Hats, though, like the lawn sign, are a common form of sloganeering. It's the appearance of the political flag since Trump that has troubled me most. Flags typically make me think of armies, of war. Isn't that why we have them, really? Shortly before the last presidential election, a convoy of Trump 2 fans drove down the highway in the desert town of Yucca Valley, taking over one side of the roadway completely. Their jacked-up trucks strapped with all the usual late right-wing flags. Don't tread on me. Okay. Stars and stripes, sadly. Blue Lives Matter. Oh, please. And of course, Trump. Sorry, Trump. All caps. Driving in the opposite direction, I rolled down my window, extended my left arm, and raised a middle finger to them, all for a good quarter mile, bathing in their angry honks and wails. Theirs was not a democratic act, to my mind, but a premeditated show of intimidation. Paramilitary gear, truck stop sunglasses, angry tattoos, and a big stupid flag are the calling cards of a modern American caste I could do without. A full-throated threat on 4 fat wheels and 2 heavy feet, made real by the Capitol rioters just a few months later, some of whom could easily have been from that desert convoy. It's far from the humble lawn sign, which feels like fair play, an agreed-upon, contained expression reserved for one's own property. To plant a flag is to stake one's claim to a place, to leave no room for debate, which is crucial to democracy. Flags are saluted, sworn allegiance to. Politicians should be questioned, sworn at under our breath when need be. All political parties play this game to an extent. They want to capture you for life. Fly the flag, never surrender. The merchandise and flag waving turns parties into sporting teams and candidates into celebrity players. People feel like they have to be loyal to their tribe. Swing voters cop a lot of flack when the choice of leader seems so stark as it does this election, but sometimes I admire their independence. I respect people's political privacy too. Unbeknownst to most Americans, the concept of secret ballot being the standard voting form originated in Australia. It had bobbed around the globe in spurts. Then in a democracy forged by the dual violence of convicts and colonisers alike, all under the watchful eye of the British monarch, keeping one's political views to oneself could be a life or death choice. It made its way to the US political system first via Louisville, Kentucky, apparently, then spread from there, replacing the printed party tickets that voters simply collected from vendors and handed in at the ballot box. Having cast my first ballots in Australia, that history too may play into my reluctance to display the family's voting preferences in our front yard. I'm a private person, and flag waving has never been my way. Yet I appreciate my neighbour's humble display. It seems silly, but I even feel like I know him a little better. For he might not have said much on the street, but now his lawn speaks volumes. Hey, thanks for listening all the way. That was all the stories from September on the TBH with Toby B Hemingway Substack, which of course you can find at tbhemingway.substack.com. Please subscribe. I do not bother you too much. It's basically 1 story a month. If you do subscribe, thank you. Also for this podcast, please stay in touch, subscribe, all that good stuff. All the music you hear on this podcast is either me noodling around in my office at home or from my old band Horse Stories. I'll be back next month. We'll make it through another month of Electionland and with more stories about that. So thanks again. See you then.